Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Linda Walsh. I serve as the Chief Community Engagement Officer at the COPD Foundation, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar sponsored by the U.S. COPD Coalition and the COPD Foundation. Today, we'll be discussing an international survey conducted on patient opinions about big tobacco ownership of pharmaceutical companies. Before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items for attendees. All attendees other than the panelists are muted during today's session. After the event, if you have any questions, please visit COPD 360 Social and Bronchiectasis and NTM 360 Social communities. They are great places to ask questions of our online community, and all of the members of today's panel are on those communities as well. We'll also be sharing links and resources towards the end of this event. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand after the session. We will send out an email once it's available. Now, I would like to introduce today's esteemed panelists, all of whom have had many years advocating for the COPD community. Valerie Chang, patient advocate, David Menino, lung doctor, and Ruth Talsinger, research scientist. It is my pleasure to be moderating this webinar. Our format for today's call will be Q&A, and as the moderator, I will ask questions and then provide the opportunity for discussion among the panelists. Today's discussion will focus on patients' views on who owns the companies that manufacture their therapies, specifically tobacco companies buying into pharma. As a patient-centric, research-powered advocacy organization, the COPD Foundation developed a survey with the intention of obtaining insights from the patient community. In collaboration with other global patient advocacy organizations, we distributed this survey to patients worldwide in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and German, to get diverse global patient views. I've asked our speakers to share a little more background about the importance of this survey and some key results because we think that this approach highlights the need for transparency. Now let's get started. Ruth, could you please spend just a few minutes giving some background on what occurred last year with Big Pharma and how that led us to our quest for patient input and ultimately this survey?
Sure, Linda. So in 2021, Philip Morris International acquired Victura. Victura is a developer of several widely used medical delivery devices and formulations for inhaled therapies that are used in people with chronic lung diseases, that's including COPD and asthma. This happened despite opposition from us and from public health and medical communities. But the missing piece in those global advocacy efforts was the direct patient voice. And we saw that as critical to the conversation. We wanted to understand patients' attitudes toward tobacco organizations' stake in the companies that make the respiratory inhaler devices. So we consulted the Foundation's Community Engagement Committee, we call it CENCO, and that community includes 11 patients and caregivers. They definitely supported our vision of conducting a survey to obtain diverse point of view from global respondents with different lung conditions and give more patients a voice in this conversation. Our target was 1,000 respondents for the survey, and we actually exceeded that target number. So we're pretty excited about sharing with you the results of the survey.
Thank you, Ruth. Valerie, as a patient advocate and one of the CENCO members that recommended the survey, could you please share why you and the committee felt that it was important to conduct this survey and what you hope to accomplish? Val, you're muted. Val, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. As Ruth mentioned, many of us who are living with chronic lung disease followed this topic very closely. While we don't always have a voice or a seat at the table to make our opinions known, CENCO can and does advocate on behalf of people with COPD, bronchiectasis, and non-tuberculosis mycobacteria lung disease, collecting and amplifying the patient voices. We knew that a tool like this survey would really help the public at large understand what patient concerns are and what patients would like to see happening moving forward. We are very concerned about the latest investment by Philip Morris.
Thank you, Valerie. What were some of the questions that the committee wanted to include in this survey?
As patients, we understood that there are a limited universe of treatments to help patients but wanted to have questions that captured how much patients really care about whether companies that help create their condition might be profiting from the treatments for lung disease. Many of us have had treatment plans that evolved for years or even decades since our diagnoses, which makes it difficult to switch medications as suggested by some professional societies after the Philip Morris purchase. Formularies can make out-of-pocket costs very challenging and don't allow patients and providers as much freedom to swap patients as desired. But the thing is, patients don't like the company that broke our kneecaps to rent us crutches for the rest of our lives.
Yes. Thank you, Valerie. We'll come back to you after we understand more about the survey results. Ruth, would you please give us a high-level summary of the survey and results? And we'll show a few graphics on the screen as you're speaking to help the audience visualize some of the results that you will be sharing.
Thank you. I'd be happy to. So as Linda stated, the COPD Foundation partnered with Global Allergy and Airways Patient Platform and Lung Foundation Australia to conduct a 13-question survey among people with chronic lung diseases. As she said, it was in English, Spanish, and German, and we ran it between January and March of 2022. All the responses were confidential, and we didn't use or collect any personally identifiable information. A total of 1,196 people who reported inhaler use completed the survey. So this is above the 1,000 target that we set out. Among these respondents, most, or 68%, were from North America, shown on the map. And although broader global regions like Australia and Europe were represented, and you could see we even made it to Asia and Africa. So we tried to get a sample from around the world. Now let's look at who completed the survey on the next slide. As you can see from the graph on the right side of the screen, most of the respondents were former smokers, about 73%, with 11% reporting current smoking and 15% reporting that they never smoked. The center chart that we look at highlights respondents' self-reported conditions. Many of them have comorbidities. What comorbidities are? They have multiple conditions that could cross over between COPD and bronchiectasis, or COPD and asthma, for example, or emphysema. So it's not adding up to 100%. The next graphic that will be shown on the screen is the key message from the survey. This is really what the results of the survey are, and it really highlights the feelings of concern that was expressed by patients about tobacco's engagement in owning lung treatments, and also the willingness to switch medications to those not profiting those companies. So if we look at the pie charts here, figure A on the left shows that many patients, 48%, you see that in the red here, would consider switching to a different inhaled medication that does not profit tobacco companies. And as Valerie said, this is easier said than done, but the reality is that 48% were interested in switching, and 33% also said that they're not sure. And that's important because we're going to talk more to Dr. Menino and to Valerie about the implications of that response in panel A. If we look to the right in figure B, 70% of the respondents to this international survey said that they're either bothered or really bothered when tobacco companies make money from an inhaler, medication, or other devices that treat their lung conditions. And really, less than 20% said that they're not really or not at all bothered. So the majority here are quite bothered by this fact. So if we go to the next figure, that's a word, cloud use machine learning. But it's an interesting screen because the reason we wanted to show it is that we also, in addition to the 13 question, collected about 800 free text responses to the question in your own words. What is your opinion of tobacco companies owning companies that are earning money from inhalers and or medications for lung conditions? When we did 3 reviewers rating, regardless of the language, 78% of the responses were negative. And that sentiment was obvious. Doesn't matter where people were in the world, people expressed negative points of view. Many of those sentiments are highlighted in the word cloud here, which shows the terms primarily used in expressing negative sentiment for the open-ended survey question. The size of the word is in direct correlation with the number of times it appeared in these responses. So you could see that the sentiment analysis really highlights the anger and frustration felt by people who are using inhaled medications and care deeply about who profits from the therapies used to treat their disease. We covered in the black circles their inappropriate words, just so you know.
Wow, Ruth, that's an incredible amount of information and compelling findings gleaned from the survey. Valerie, what were some of the key takeaways that you found of importance to someone living with respiratory disease?
Yeah, patients are really, really concerned about companies making products which cause their lung disease and then don't want them to further profit from their misery, basically. It's pretty clear to me, and the survey bears that out, and it's consistent with every patient I've ever spoken to.
Thank you. Dr. Menino, I'd now like to bring you into the conversation. As one of the respiratory health medical experts that assisted with the formulation of the questions, and as a physician, can you please share with us what stands out for you from this survey and why it's important for the medical community to understand the patient's perspective?
Thanks, Linda. I'd be happy to. I think what stands out for me is that patients survey that were participating in the survey really care that tobacco companies have a financial stake in drug or device companies that profit from these treatments that are certainly life-saving and life-altering for them. And a large percentage of respondents also stated that they would be interested in switching inhalers if they knew that a tobacco company made or sold their brand of inhaler. So our overall conclusion from the survey was that patients really want transparency and ethically funded treatment options. And it's our role as healthcare professionals and patient advocates to elevate their voices to a level that creates lasting and meaningful change. Ruth and I are aligned in that the foundation champions patient-provider collaboration for shared decision-making when it comes to a person's health, and that includes the discussions one has about what therapies a patient should be on, and we understand that there are a lot of other factors such as insurance coverage and co-pays and health care system limitations and convenience that influence how patients make these treatment choices in conjunction with their physicians, but this really needs to be part of the conversation that physicians and patients have together, and that's something that that goes under the term shared decision making.
So I think we're going to show an image now that the way we depict shared decision-making of patients, providers working together, but it's beyond that, because what the survey demonstrates is the COPD Foundation's commitment to applying our research capability and network of partners around the world to informing care for our community. And we describe this in that little text that we have at the top that describes the image. Patients are at the center, and that's an expression that we always talk about, patient centricity. They're at the center, but they're not alone. We're all around here supporting the patient and working with the patient to help them manage their health.
Thanks, Ruth. And with regard to who makes medications or how they're supplied to patients, there are a number of factors that are part of this discussion. When I talk with patients, some patients are much better educated and informed on who makes therapies, what may work, what doesn't work, the various costs and then they come in with various ideas or questions that we can go over together, so they can make an informed choice. Although other patients may not have that degree of information and education, and in that case, it is up to me and other healthcare providers to discuss options with them, and these include, for example, some patients may not care where their medication comes from. The only thing that really matters to them is whether it works and how much it's going to cost them and how it makes them feel. Other patients have other considerations, including co-pays and insurance, and whether they're in the Medicare donut hole or the like. So there are lots of different, in addition to, for example, how easy this device is to use, because these various devices that are used to treat chronic lung disease have certain nuances to how they are best used correctly. And not everybody, for example, if somebody has bad arthritis, they might not be able to work certain types of devices. So that's something else that certainly comes into the discussion also. But it's certainly important that providers understand the needs and choices that patients make, and that we sort of work together to help them understand what their options are, and that we can make the best recommendation for them. So we call that, again, it's sort of shared decision making that results in the best therapeutic options for our patients.
Yes, those are all incredibly important points, Dr. Menino. Thank you. Valerie, as you listen to Dr. Menino's discussion and as a COPD patient and an advocate for other respiratory patients, how do you see the patient's role in shared decision-making?
Well, first of all, of course, I agree with Dr. Menino that patients come with all different levels of understanding and engagement. Some of them just give me the stuff I've always taken, give me the stuff that costs the least out of pocket so I can still buy my groceries. And others are like, no, I want the latest and greatest, or I want the one that allows me to sleep well at night, knowing that I'm not funding a cause that I feel strongly against. So there's just a lot of different perspectives, and it's really wonderful when the healthcare team can support the patient in making the choices that work best for the patient. It's just very complicated, as Dr. Menino indicated, especially since some patients have arthritis or have difficulty inhaling well, and so some medicines are not appropriate for them. And it's just really a matching game. And then there's also side effects, and different medicines have different side effects. So there's just a lot to unpack. But I will leave it there and let Ruth explain more.
Thank you. So I want to raise something else, because I don't know if a lot of people are aware that Big Tobacco is hiring credible experts and investing in drug development for diseases associated with smoking and vaping, while they continue to expand the sale of tobacco and nicotine products that kill millions of people annually, and are creating a new generation, especially with vaping, of nicotine addicts.
Yeah, that's a very powerful statement, Ruth. The COPD Foundation advocates in many ways when it comes to tobacco by partnering with organizations and government entities. As an example, we've co-signed letters with Tobacco-Free Kids on reducing nicotine levels, preventing menthol flavoring, and urging the FDA authority to regulate synthetic nicotine. Valerie, can you share some of the partnerships and ways the US COPD Coalition advocates for patients and providers, and what our community can do to be a part of it?
Yeah, the US COPD Coalition is very involved in advocacy, and we're actively working with various patient organizations and public health organizations to help support efforts for all people to breathe clean air. We're also co-signing letters opposing legislation championed by Juul and other vaping organizations. As most people know, there is a vaping epidemic among our school children. Our high school in Hawaii has 1/3 of our student body vaping, which is really scary to me. The Lancet Commission towards the Elimination of Chronic Obstructive Pulmonary Disease recognizes that tobacco and other lung irritants are the major barrier to eliminating COPD. And so we at the US COPD Coalition are working to try to help this. And when we co-sign the letters, we often are joining with organizations like American Lung, American Cancer, American Heart, and we just all want to have a united community that recognizes that good health helps all of us and helps our communities stay healthier.
I agree, Valerie. The main message from today, I hope, is the need for the public to engage in a campaign to save our lungs and our children's health. This is COPD Awareness Month. Get involved in our activities. Tell people about the need to invest in the eradication of chronic lung diseases like COPD. Tell Congress that we demand the same attention and the same investment that is given to other chronic diseases like heart disease and cancer.
That's an excellent closing message, Ruth. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us and helping us keep this critically important conversation going. Once again, if you have a question that we were unable to address today, please refer to our COPD 360 social site for more answers. And we should be showing some additional resources here, and we encourage you to read, view, and share the information with your networks. A recording of this event will be available on demand very soon. And a big thank you again to our panelists and to the US COPD Coalition for hosting this important event and topic. If you want to help us spread the word on COPD advocacy, continue to visit the COPD Foundation and US COPD Coalition websites. Thank you.
And thank you.
Oh, thank you.